Hey, welcome to another fun week of how do I get more customers in 30 minutes? Now, last week, some of you responded back, and I spoke with Katie in the group there, and they thought, well, Jeff, you did a really nice job of putting all this together, but it was a little bit too much at one time. And I said, okay, I know it was a bit of a fire hose, but I wanted to give you all of it even though I broke it down into little bite-sized pieces. They said, "Can you break it down even further?" I said, "Sure." So let's talk about today about defining your audience. And when I think about that, and some of you might connect, and this would I'm going to bring this up at the very end about that Dr. Seuss book where that little bird fell out of the tree. I don't know if you remember this, but fell out of a tree and it walked around and asked everybody, "Are you my mother?" And a little bird was bumping into a cow. "Are you my mother?" "No." "Are you my mother?" "It's a chicken." "No." "Are you my mother?" "It's a dog." "No, I'm not." We want to not stumble about. We want to figure out who our ideal audience is. So when we're out in the marketplace, we are absolutely speaking to the people that are most likely to buy our product or services. So before we get started, I want to talk about, hey, what happens if you don't define your ideal audience? And I think this is just as important as the reason you should define your audience. The first one is the whole sales process is very challenging. I mean, you've probably done this before where somebody kind of shows a little bit of interest. So you start talking about, I know I've been guilty of it. And I'm like wrestling with these people. I'm trying to convince them that what I do is really the answer when I realize they're not my ideal customer. I shouldn't be wrestling with this giant. I should just let them go. So the sales process, if you notice that the sales process is challenging, you're probably trying to convince the little bird that the elephant is its mother. It's not. We want to pass it. The next one is loss of profit. Let's face it, when you're having a challenging sales process, the value isn't there. So we tend to see less profit when you do make a sale. So, because let's face it, the people are not seeing it as valuable. So they're going to pay less if they do buy it. The worst thing is then they cancel or the return rate is higher. So it's a challenging sales process. You make less money and more people return or cancel on your product or service. I mean, at this point, how excited are you to make sure you have your ideal client? The last thing is lower referral rates. I mean, let's just be straight up. If you're having to deal with somebody that's a challenging process, you make very little profit on it, they cancel, the return rates higher. Do you think that's going to drive more referrals? Absolutely not. It's going to hurt your business. And so you're always going to have to be recreating that first sale over and over again. And, at some point, we like to have that stream of income coming in because of our referral rates being higher. So the first thing is what happens if you don't know who your customers? Challenging sales process, loss of profit, higher cancellation or return rates, and your referral rates are not as high. The next thing is key factors to defining your audience. What are my demographics? And when we talk about demographics, we want to say, hey, what are their age? What's the gender? What's the race? How about their income, marital status, or employment? These are things that we'll dive in a little further, but you want to know this. What are my demographics? Because these are just key factors. The next ones are, what are my psychographics? And when I talk about psychographics, what I'm really talking about is what's their personality like? What are their interests? How about their activities, their lifestyle or their values? Remember that lifestyle or values, that plays a very important part. And then finally, what are my geographics? In other words, within a certain range of primary business, local, regional, or national. If you're, as an example, if you're a church, unless you're just a mega church, people are going to drive so far for your Sunday messages or your Wednesday night services. So you need to know that. So, what are my demographics? What are my psychographics? And what are my geographics? These are the things we're going to dive in today to help you figure out, hey, who is that ideal audience I'm supposed to be speaking to? So let's dive into the demographics first. Let's talk about gender. How do they define themselves? And by this I mean, are they female, male, non-binary? Are they now? We have that going on, so we have to respect that. The question is, how do they define themselves? The next one is age range. Are they millennials, Gen Xers, baby boomers? Because let's face it, if you're a baby boomer and you're trying to talk to a Gen Xer, there is a bit of a language difference. So you need to know who you're speaking with because the language will be different. The next one will be career industry. I mean, are they corporate professionals? Are they stay-at-home parents? And this could be a mom or a dad that stays at home. Are they creative entrepreneurs? Who are they? What is their career? What industries do they work in? Knowing this helps understand when you put this together, when you speak the language to these people, when you put articles together, when you put visuals together. This all plays a very important part. Additionally, income, marital status, lifestyle. This is the language you want to talk, not just English, but I'm talking about you need to speak female language to a millennial who works in the corporate field, who is a stay-at-home, maybe they're working from home right now and they make X number of dollars and they're not married. Well, I mean, let's face it, that will help you define and have a conversation with these people so much easier. The next thing is psychographics. Now, some people say, well, God, what is psychographics? It's really your personality. I mean, are you outgoing? Like, are you an extrovert or an introvert? Because let's face it, if your ideal audience that buys your product or service, if they're introverts and you're trying to invite them to a large event and you're not getting many to show up, that's a clue, gang. But if you invite them to coffee, they come every time because it's just you and them, or maybe it's you and just a few. Well, if you know that your ideal audience are introverts, you can set it up so it makes them feel comfortable because you're speaking their language. When I say speak the language, I'm talking about the videos you make, the messages you make, the articles you make, the events you create. You want to make sure that that fits their personality. The next thing is their interest. Now, when I speak interest, and again, I know some of these things are hot buttons. They're a little touchy, but they're so important. Political, religious, or faith-based. Are they parent or no parent? These are some of the things when I talk about when I say interest. Because let's face it, when you're trying to talk to everybody, no one listens because it's just so watered down because you're trying to talk to so many people. But if you're talking to somebody politically that has a lean one way or the other, and they're also this particular religion and they believe in these faith and they follow these people and they're a parent, do you think your message is much clearer for them to see? I'll give you an example. If I were putting together an ad, let's say, and this is kind of a bonus, an ad on Facebook, and it was for one of my air conditioning companies. I might say homeowners with 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes in the Coachella Valley needing to replace their air conditioning systems. See, at this point, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, you probably have a family, you're homeowners, you live in the Coachella Valley, and also you're ready to replace your heating and air conditioning system. You see, I've really defined it down because I know who I'm looking for. So this helps with this. The next thing is activities. What kind of things they like to do? Are they hike? Do they travel? Do they go up on the tram? Do they like to go out to Indian canyons? Are they big readers? What kind of reading do they like? Do they play golf? Are they golf members at a particular club, or they like playing at the municipal golf courses or at the resorts? Do they play pickleball? Really, how often are they competitive? They just play for fun? Are they just started? Knowing these activities that they like to do help create the message that will attract them to you, your product, and your service. The next one is lifestyle. You may have people that are just back to basics. And what I mean by that, maybe they may, and we have some friends that surprised me. I didn't realize this, but when they go out on a trip, when they go camping, they literally go camping. When my wife and I go camping, we go glamping. Like, it has a big bed in there and a bathroom in the tent and big fireplace. These friends like to go out in the sticks and make their own, gather their own wood and make their own fires. I think that's wonderful. If I went with them, It's okay because then I had to do that. Me, I'd freeze to death and I wouldn't be able to catch any fish. Are they retired? Do they like tiny house or they like living behind the gates, whatever it might be? Understand their lifestyle and their values. This is pretty wide, but certainly an important factor. I'll give you an example. If you don't read the LA Times, we have nothing in common. They might have a value like that. And I'll give you an example. One of our dear friends, she is or was a Tom Brady fan. And then Tom Brady won the Super Bowl and he announced that he also has this political support for a particular candidate. When my friend found this out, she burned his jersey in her barbecue and stopped watching any game that Tom Brady was in. For me now, if I were advertising to her, do you think I'd make sure not to put Tom Brady or that political figure in that piece of advertisement or message I sent? Absolutely. You need to know what their values are. These all fall under what's called psychographics. The next one is geographic. Now, this may seem pretty simple, but I want to kind of peel it back a little bit more for you and show you something here. The first one is a service area. It defines how far someone will travel. So, in general, that's what we're talking about. If it's rural, people tend to travel longer distances for service or products because they're used to it. Like my wife grew up in North Dakota, and it was no big deal for her to travel 17 to 20 miles to a certain town that might have a theater or maybe a restaurant or a particular grocery store. She would never travel 17 to 20 miles here in the desert because she doesn't have to do that because she lives in the city now. Somebody in the city will generally want to do business with someone within a certain number of blocks or miles or minutes. I say miles or minutes because when I moved from Texas to here, or in other words, it was Arizona to here, I used to say I used to live X number of miles from something. Here in California, we speak in minutes. I'm 30 minutes from here. I'm 20 minutes. I'll be there in 15 minutes. So people like that. If you're in a city, we want to keep those numbers pretty small. We have dear friends who live at PGA West and they say, we never travel outside our quadrant. I'm like, well, what's your quadrant? Well, if we have to travel north of Highway 111 or west of Washington, then we shouldn't be going. That's too far from us. I'm like, wow, that's wild. But then I find myself doing the same thing. Like if somebody lives in Cat City, that's a big haul for me. Even though my office is in Rancho Mirage, I'll find myself also limiting where I'll go. So be aware of that. If you're in a particular city or geographic, if you're something that's a walk-in, I want to back up for just a second here for just one second on that. On the city, I'm going to give you an example. There is a sandwich company here in the valley that they say they will only deliver within a certain distance from their shop. It's 1 mile. My office is just a fraction beyond that, and they're very generous to deliver to me. But otherwise, if I were probably a block further away, they wouldn't deliver. This is one of those things that business says, hey, it's not profitable for me to deliver 5 miles away, 3 miles away, 1 mile. Okay. Now I have here online. When you serve a an audience that's online and you know who you're speaking to, it now becomes unlimited and it's only limited to your language and the shipment restrictions. So in other words, if you only speak English, you are somewhat limited, or if you speak only Spanish, you are somewhat limited, but your audience could be global and is only limited by your shipment restrictions. Let me give you an example of this. Let's say Jan of Kitchen Kitchen. She starts a copy of the Coffee of the Month Club, and we start running ads for her that would attract anyone from in the United States. Maybe she start, yeah, anywhere in the United States. Could she ship coffee to anyone anywhere in the United States? I would say generally yes. And after we define her target market, then every month she sends out this coffee. Now, what would that possibly do for her business because she's expanded her geographic range? It could be a huge difference for her business if she had an online coffee club. So, if we're thinking about this rural, They'll go a little further. City, a little tighter. Online, unlimited. Okay. So let's talk about things called non negotiables. And these are things that you'll want to decide before you're going forward. Like, who do I want to work with? Do you enjoy working with your best customers? Why? What are things that maybe drive you crazy? Do you enjoy serving this ideal group? If not, it's a non-negotiable. If they don't fit this particular group, you're probably not going to work with them. Like, as an example, go back to sandwich people. Because I know the owner, he's kind enough to go that little bit of an extra, I don't want to say extra mile, extra a couple hundred yards, and let me have that sandwich. But again, if I called from, let's say, another person I know that's just a few blocks away, further away, and they said, "What is your address?" I told them, they'd probably say, "No, you have to come pick it up." That's non-negotiable. Okay. The other one is, how accessible will you be? And what I mean by that is, we live in this always on world. So are you going to be accessible by phone and text 24/7? Or will you say, hey, by 3 o'clock on Friday afternoons, I'm shutting it down. And on Saturday and Sunday, unless it's an emergency, you can only get a hold of me by text. Will you make in person? Will you work in person or you prefer not to? Make these decisions up front so you know these are things that are non-negotiable. So when you're attracting your ideal clients, they understand that. The other thing you're going to find out is if these are things your ideal client also appreciate, that will be another reason why you bond. Like, as an example, Hobby Lobby. I think they close every Sunday because of their views, their religious views. They close on Sundays as day of Sabbath. Well, their ideal customer probably appreciates that. They respect it. They don't get upset because they're closed. They're probably attracting more of those type of customers. Does that make sense? And that takes us to the next one, faith or political view. If you have Christian views or other faith views, you're going to attract those kind of people. But will you work with people that are different than that? Or if you're a liberal conservative, like if you're my friend who burned the who burned the shirt, the jersey, yeah, you probably don't want to work with people who are conservative because it's too hard. It's that challenging sale, if you will. Every time you're around and they bring up something, whether it's the opposite side of the coin, and they want to rub a little salt in the wound. If you're not into that, it's a non-negotiable. I'm not even going to talk about that. Okay. So these are non-negotiable. So the question is, hey, Jeff, why is this important? Well, the big reason is the language. And when I say why is this important, why is it important to know your audience? Well, first of all, the language. And we kind of hinted about this a little earlier is when you're speaking to the right demographic, there's a certain era. In other words, they might be Gen Xers, might be baby boomers, whatever age group they're millennials. The language you speak, you want to speak in that era of language. Why? Because there's immediate connection. If somebody walks in and they're in a leisure suit, no offense to people who wear leisure suits, we can immediately say, hey, these people are of a certain era. And we will either be attracted to them or it will repel us. So we want to make sure our language does the same thing. Does it repel? Because that's not a bad thing. Because we want to repel the people that are not our ideal customer. We don't want challenging people coming in, costing us money, making our returns higher, and then getting low referrals. Okay. The other language is there's a communication gap. I've kind of already alluded to that. But if you're speaking the wrong language to another group, there is a gap. And when there's a gap, when there's lack of understanding, I guarantee you, folks, it will affect your bottom line. When you're doing this, it will all come down. When I say advertising, it'll be advertising in articles. When you're creating content, you're going to use this language so it helps do just what we said. It will attract and repel the people that are not supposed to be there. It will close the gap in the communication. All right. So language is really important. The next one is visuals. When you're choosing visuals for your communication, you want to make sure, again, it matches the era. If I'm speaking to somebody who's a baby boomer that was in the war, I pull something up with that, there'll be a connection there. if I'm speaking to somebody and it's about the Twin Towers and they were of the age that that made sense, there's an immediate connection there. It gets their attention. But if I pull something up from 1929 and it's of the crash in 1929, and I'm trying to get a Gen Xer to see, really connect with this, there's no relevance there. None. I mean, think about it. As we move forward, roll out 10 years, and now people that were born 2 years ago, let's say we go 10, so they're 12, 13, 14 years old. Do you think if we started referring back to the pandemic, the era of the pandemic, and we had pictures of that, people wearing masks, 'cause hope to God if we're not wearing them 10 years from now, that they'll see that and there's an immediate connection with them. They know what you're talking about. But somebody who was born 5 years from now, and you try to do that 10 years later, they probably don't get it because hopefully we're not wearing masks. Also, interest, the visual interest. Remember, we said people who like to go out and they're going hiking, or they're camping, or they're cyclists, or they're playing pickleball. These are real important. These are those connection points because I was just saying this morning in my group, I said, "Hey, a picture's worth what? 1,000 words." Well, somebody showed us two words or two pictures that are worth 2,000 words, right? So using the right images does a lot of your selling. And you can make sure if you're speaking to somebody who's a parent with, let's say young children, and you're getting them ready for school, and you show them, a parent packing their lunchbox or whatever it may be. Again, that may be the wrong era. There'll be a connection there. The next one is music. Music is real important because let's think about it. Have you ever been driving down the road and a song comes on and it's of when you were in that 18 to 20-year age and it starts playing? Do you immediately transfer back to that time and all of a sudden you actually become younger just for that instant? That's how powerful music is, gang. So when you're using music in your communication with the right language, with the right visuals, it's like, man, peanut butter always goes better with jelly. Music is like jelly on that sandwich, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So this is why it's important to have the right language, the visuals, and the music so that it's all coming together. Now, at this point you should have an idea of, hey, how do I find my ideal audience? But you should also know who they are. So here's an example. Are they some of the questions you might want to write this down. Are they primarily male or female? Let me just kind of stop right there for a second. Primarily, yes, you may sell to both male and female, but if you have a women's lingerie shop, primarily you sell to females, except in certain situations. A holiday, like a woman's birthday, the male is coming in, but primarily it's female. All right. Are they younger, older, or middle aged? Are they married or are they single? Do they have children or grandchildren? Are they still working or are they retired? See, that's a different language. If you're dealing with somebody who's still working and you say, I'll meet you at 10 o'clock in the morning, that's going to be really tough. At 10 o'clock in the morning, they're probably on the third hole of the front nine. They may not be able to get to you. It'll be an afternoon thing. Their likes and dislikes, we talked about that. You can now, with all this information, you can create rapport with your messaging. And that's what it's all about. Quite frankly, your messaging is your targeted marketing. Because as we know now, more and more privacy rules and are going into play with Facebook and Google. In fact, on the 26th, some changes were made that said, hey, we're going to protect the audience more by restricting how targeted you could get. Well, if you're writing articles or you're putting images up, making videos, you can be very targeted with that message so that you can create rapport with your audience. Your message is today's targeting. And it has been forever. But we got off track when it was so easy to say, wow, I want to speak to these people that have this kind of money, live in these kind of houses, because the algorithms of some of the platforms allowed me to do that. Now we can do it through the articles we write. So I just want to thank you for joining us today for another local business workshop. I think this was a lot of fun. I hope breaking this down and understanding not only the value of having of knowing your local or knowing your audience, but also what it could cost you by not knowing who your ideal audience from all the factors that we spoke about. Also, I want to invite you to join us next week when we talk about researching. Because one is okay. Now I know who my audience is, but I want to know what it is that keeps them up at night. What are those burning challenges they deal with that we want to make sure that when we create our content, whether it's video or audio or it's written, that it addresses those because we want to be the band aid that they reach for whenever they have a little boo boo and there's a cut. We want to be that answer. So that's next week at 11 o'clock. I hope you'll tune in, bring a friend, and we're just building on this. So we got our ideal audience. We're going to talk about, hey, how do we research the right topics? Because here's my saying is we at Swing Point Media never make content our ideal audience is not already searching for. I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank Katie and the Rancho Mount Chamber of Commerce for helping support this. And if you have any questions, here's my phone number, my email address. Please reach out. And of course, a lot of you are reaching out to the chamber and letting us know if you like this, you didn't like it. And we just say, hey, thank you so much. We'll see you again next week.